Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. And a warm welcome to the afternoon show. I'm Bill Arnold, and I'm so glad that I'm going to have some time, and we're going to have some time with Dr. Andy Schuttinga today. He's going to bring us some really good principles and tips for having some counseling care with our loved ones. Because, you know, a lot of people come to us, and they're looking for advice or counsel, or can you sit and listen to what's on my heart right now? So it is important to know how to do all of the above. And as believers, we want to be available and compassionate and sympathetic, and he's going to help us navigate our way through that. We were in the green room just talking before the start of the show, and he was talking about the difference between pastoral counseling and pastoral care. That was new information to me, so I'm going to learn a lot this hour. He is a psychology professor at North Central University here in the Twin Cities. Andy, nice to have you back.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Thank you. So a big topic. Everybody does this. This applies to everybody because we all have friends and loved ones that say, hey, can I talk to you about something?
Oh, yeah. Which usually makes you do one of two things. I'd love to listen, or you want to run away.
Yeah.
And we've all talked to that person.
Yep.
And we've all been that person, right? Where you say, hey, can I talk to you about something? And you can see it on their face like, oh, no, please not me. I do not want to deal with your stuff today.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get people who say, oh, wow, what's going on? How can I help you?
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing.
Well, let's talk about that distinction that you brought up in the green room.
Yeah.
Pastoral counseling versus pastoral care. I didn't know there was a difference.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty significant difference, and I don't think a lot of people know this. Pastoral counseling is quite literally a licensed profession. So a pastoral counselor unless I'm getting this wrong, if somebody knows that I'm wrong, please text in or whatever. But in the state of Minnesota, to be a licensed professional counselor, you have to have a master's degree in counseling.
Yes.
And there's different clinical programs that teach you how to do pastoral counseling. So you kind of marry spiritual counseling, biblical spiritual counseling with prayer and Bible verses and Bible training alongside your more traditional secular therapy models. Mm-hmm. So if you want to use, for example, like you're having trouble raising your kids and they're really disobedient and you don't know what to do and you want to go see a pastoral counselor, they can help you using behavioral principles that you would find in a secular clinic.
If they're licensed.
Yeah, if they're licensed. Yeah. And they can also help you with the spiritual component of how do you pray for your kids, how do you pray with your kids, if you have questions about God and purpose and whatnot. They can really help you with that. So pastoral counseling is a really wonderful thing. They're harder to find. There's just fewer pastoral counselors out there. A lot of churches will have them on staff, and there's a lot of pastors out there. I take that back. There are some pastors out there who are pastoral counselors. So they're licensed, but they counsel from a pastoral perspective.
Okay.
But pastoral care is something that a lot of people can do as a layperson, and a lot of ministers do this, a lot of pastors do this. They're able to offer a certain level of care for people with mental health issues, but they also need to and should have a limit to what kind of care they can offer. So somebody offering pastoral care should not be helping someone deal with, say, an eating disorder or even something like clinical depression. That should be left to professional counselors. And we as lay people, we can, and I'll talk about this today, there's a lot of things that we can do that are really helpful, that help people feel listened to, understood, and heard, and cared for without getting into the deeper clinical treatment of a lot of mental health disorders. So that's the big difference.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, Andy, that most people really feel liberated when they feel like they've been understood by somebody?
Yes.
When somebody says to them, I think I understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, thank you.
Oh, that's a huge thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, but when you feel understood, I think there is a liberation from some of your anxiety.
I think there is. There's something very significant about sharing pain and suffering with other people and recognizing that someone else sees that in you is definitely a liberating feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a little bit of freedom to also be more honest and more vulnerable. And I think that honesty and vulnerability can begin the process of healing. Now, just being heard and listened to is not enough in many cases, right? You've got to go farther than that to provide help to people, but it's a great first step. And when someone genuinely believes you're listening to me and you care for me, that can do wonders for the soul and can offer encouragement in sometimes some really surprising ways that are also very powerful.
Yeah. No, we're not dissing at all, because I think there's been tons of people listening right now that have been to their church to get some counseling from a pastor.
Yeah.
And the pastor did a wonderful job helping them.
You bet.
But there is a distinction, and I don't think we're splitting hairs, when you are giving pastoral counseling. If you are a licensed person, you have a broader range from which to discuss.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm saying that well.
You have a much larger toolkit.
That's better.
I think that's a good way to look at it. Pastoral counselors.
Let me back up, Andy.
Yeah, go ahead.
You have a much larger toolkit.
Yes. I see what you did there.
Yeah,
very clever.
I'm taking credit for that.
Yeah, that was great, Bill.
Well, I couldn't get the thought right, and then I got it right because you helped, and then I thought, I'll say it again.
Well, it's in my toolkit.
Yeah.
But it's true. And, let's go back to the parenting example. A lot of pastors have been very successful parents, I'm sure. But some have not, and some have maybe struggled with raising their own kids because they didn't have the tools in their kit, the behavioral techniques, learning how to use, timeouts effectively, learning how to use a token economy to reward your kids for the good behaviors that they do when they're little. There's lots of training techniques that you can teach people. But a licensed therapist can help you with that at a much deeper level. They'll have more tools at their disposal. And a spiritual counselor can help you with those spiritual questions that you might have. And if you can put those two together in the same room, that can be really, really valuable for people. Mm-hmm. But not everybody has that. And not everybody has that kind of training, because you need a master's degree before you can be a licensed therapist in, I believe, every state. I think every state in the country now, to be a licensed mental health counselor, you need a master's degree and a couple thousand hours of supervised practice. So it's not something that you can just show up and do, nor is it something that you should just show up and do. And that's why I've been saying this for years. I think, and churches out there, if you're listening to this, think about budgeting for a full-time therapist in your church. That would be an incredible gift to your congregation, to have somebody on staff who maybe doesn't necessarily go to your church, but can provide license-level counseling for people who do go to your church. Because there's some boundaries and gray areas about, is it really a good idea to have somebody who's an elder in your church also be your staff psychologist? Probably not. Because you're going to hear things and talk about things that maybe someone from the church doesn't need to know about. Yeah. So there's some ethical rules that you've got to be careful with in that situation. But, man, if churches could spend some more of their resources on professional counselors to make available to their parishioners or to community members, that'd be an incredible thing for our communities.
Mm-hmm. I have a guest who is a regular here on the show, and he is, I think, writing a book, or has always wanted to write a book, called Why All of Your Friends Are Wrong.
That sounds like a good book.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But as friends, we want to counsel our friends, but maybe we can't always do the best job because we're not listening well enough. What do you think the core is of that? We want to fix our loved ones' problems, don't we?
Oh, yeah. And I think you hit something very important. It's the listening component.
Mm.
One of the hardest things for people to do is resist being a solution offerer. That's a terrible phrase.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's a real word. Offerer?
I really doubt offerer is a real word.
Yeah.
Maybe someone can Google it and let us know. But
it could be embarrassing.
I don't
I
mind
think
it.
Wyatt's got something to say.
I make up a lot of words.
I was just going to say, this interview had been going so well up until this point. Now you're making up words.
I kind of agree.
Wyatt, isn't there a button to push somewhere? Oh, my goodness.
And the text line doesn't seem to be open. Wyatt, if we get that fired up.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic.
What kind of omen that is.
This is a tough crowd today. Okay.
It is a rough crowd.
Let me offer you some advice.
Yeah.
Which is literally the last thing people want to hear, circling back. I have a problem. Bill, I have a problem. Well, let me tell you what to do. that doesn't make people feel heard or understood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something, guys, men in particular, are notorious for doing this, especially to their spouses. Hey, I had a terrible thing happen at work. My boss did this or my coworker did this. And usually men tend to say, well, here's what you should do. Or friends tend to say, well, here's what you should do. And that kind of invalidates what the person who's hurting is trying to convey. So I didn't come to you for advice. I want to talk about this. I want you to hear how I feel. And if you're having conflict with somebody, now you're not in a counseling role anymore. That's a different situation. So let's just stick with how to help somebody who's coming to you for assistance. The best thing that you can do is just listen carefully and try to fully understand the situation before you ever offer a solution.
Yeah.
That's one of the number one rules.
What about, Andy, just trying to be comfortable in a person's discomfort? Because I think that when you are uncomfortable with someone's discomfort, the quickest thing you try to do is come up with a solution.
Oh, yeah.
To eliminate the discomfort.
Yeah.
And that isn't necessarily very helpful.
No, it's not.
Or is it?
No, it's not. And
Okay.
and I know this from personal experience. I tend to do that. I know I'm the type of person that if somebody comes to me and I work with, I'm a college professor. I work with students, and a lot of times they do come to me and say, Dr. Schuttinga, what should I do? Or I don't know what to do. What do you think about this? And that's when I'm free to give advice. But it's my natural default, and I know many of you listening are like this too. It's your natural default when somebody comes to you with a problem that makes you uncomfortable is to try to fix it rather than kind of sit with them in that space of, I'm hurting with you. I feel this with you. And that can be a real challenge. And it's important for us to recognize that if we're that type of person, when somebody comes to us with a feeling or an issue or a conflict that they're dealing with somebody else, that we empathize with their feelings, try to understand where they're coming from. And you can help yourself by paraphrasing and rephrasing, restating what they've said. So you're telling me you're really hurt by your coworker saying these things to you in this fashion. And they say, yes, you understand me. Well, all I did was restate what you just said to me. But that's powerful. Mm-hmm. Because when you restate it correctly, they know you're listening. And they know you've heard them. They know you've understood them. And that's a powerful way to begin a helping conversation.
Andy, I'm guessing it's more difficult when you have a history with someone to be a more empathetic listener and to not try to solve the problem. This is why counselors can be so caring and helpful and being such a great listener, because they're hearing basically some of the problems for the first time.
That's an excellent point. You're exactly right. Because when you go to family members, they know every mistake you've made.
Are you bringing this up again?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
They've been there for all of your failures and all of your triumphs, too.
Broken record. Here we go.
Right, exactly. Yep. And even friends can be a little bit like that, too.
Yeah, they can.
They're like, well, man, you're always in a conflict with somebody. So what is it this time? Well, I didn't
And do you think it
do
might be
anything
you?
this time. Yeah. And then you start to feel like, well, maybe it is me. I have this old demotivational poster. You remember those old motivational posters?
Yeah.
Well, I have some demotivational posters that say the only consistent problem in all of your relationships is you.
Right.
Which is also kind of true. I mean, we have to look at ourselves, too, in every situation. If we have a lot of conflict, we have to look at ourselves. Well, what am I doing to contribute to that? It's not always the other person. You're not always a victim. These things almost always go both ways.
Mm-hmm. So, Andy, after a break, I want to hear some of the ways in which we can improve our skill set when it comes to just being ready, being available, being effective, being loving, being Christ-like, and helping people as a amateur counselor. You being the professional, but you're going to be coaching us amateurs.
Yeah.
As to just how to be more effective, how to be better listeners, how to love people where they're at and listen to what they're saying and just try to be in their space with them.
Sounds good.
Does that sound fair?
You bet.
All right. And if you have a question or comment for Dr. Andy Schuttinga, you can text it over 877-933-2484. You might be the kind of person that goes to Paris and still listens to Faith Radio on the app. And I'm thinking of a particular couple from northern Minnesota. Or you might be more like the person that just goes into the next room in your apartment and listens. Well, the good news is using the app is just as easy in both places. Downloading the free app is crazy easy. Just text the word app to 877-933-2484 and then click the link. And if you happen to be in Paris, there is a coffee shop, but you should see the prices of biscotti. They have gone through the roof. I recommend avoiding it. Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. He's a psychology professor, so he teaches psychology at North Central University here in the Twin Cities. And he's going to give us a little bit of encouragement, some pointers, some godly counsel as to how to be a better listener, a better amateur counselor or caregiver to people who come to us who want advice or counseling, or we're not qualified to do it, but we're the body of Christ, so let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it as best we can.
I think everybody is qualified to be a good listener.
Amen.
And a comforter and an encourager.
I think you
don't need a degree of any kind to be able to tell somebody, hey, man, I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know what women call each other. You know, we can say like, hey, man, hey, brother, hey, dude.
Yeah.
But women have different terms for that, and I can't really think of what they are. But we can say to our friend, hey, you know what? It's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. I'm here for you. Or I know what that feels like. That's building rapport. That's a basic counseling skill, is
right.
Building rapport with somebody you're listening to and saying, we're in this together. I want to help you, and I can help you to a certain degree. And we can talk about the limits of that later on.
That seems like a commitment of some kind.
Sure, it is.
You're going to be okay. That may not be true.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. That may or may not be possible.
Yeah.
So, but I love the direction you're going.
You have to be genuine with these things if you're going to say them. And that's the key. And, you know, there's Minnesota Nice, which is, yeah, we'll have you over for a fire sometime.
Yeah.
Which means probably not. But I have to say it.
Is it Minnesota Nice or Minnesota Passive Aggressive?
No, I think they're both the same thing.
Okay.
We just call them to strangers the nicer one, which is Minnesota Nice, right? But
I don't know if that's true anymore, the Minnesota Nice thing. I think that's worn out.
I'm not a Minnesota native, so I'm really hesitant to weigh in on that issue.
Are you out east? You Pennsylvania?
No.
Where?
No, I've lived in Arizona, Seattle, Iowa, Indonesia. I think that's it.
Okay.
That's a lot. Chicago.
Right. Okay. Let's get back to the skill sets because I want them. I want the skill set.
So one of the number one basic counseling skills, and again, these are not clinical things. These are things that anybody can do. Number one is attending, which is attending, full eye contact, body positioning, which we can talk a lot more in detail about, and just making sure the person you're talking with knows you're 100% in. So attending also means if you're going to have a serious conversation with somebody who's dealing with an issue or maybe even a mental health issue, one of the best things you can do is take out your phone and make not a big show of it, but make a show and say, I'm turning this off. I have, if you're in the middle of a work day, you may not be able to do that, but you probably can.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, I'm showing you, I want you to know, I'm turning my phone off to do not disturb for a half an hour. Let's talk. That's so powerful to people because how many times have you been in a conversation, the phone rings, they get a text, they're like, oh, I got to check this.
They may not answer it, but they look at it.
Right.
And that's almost as bad.
Yeah, because you're in the middle of telling them something hard.
Yeah.
Or you're sharing your feelings, and that can be really a downer.
You need to get that?
Yeah, right?
You need to get that?
Yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah, I do. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you also want to be able to put yourself in a position where you can do that. If you're like in the middle of a very busy workday, it's maybe not the best idea to have a conversation with somebody. Hey, tell me how you're feeling. Oh, but I do have a work call coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's where you say, I really care about you and I care about how you're feeling. Can we schedule a time
there you go.
Where I can dedicate myself
create a space
to you? And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that's so much better than just dealing with somebody in the moment. Like I was talking to the group of pastors yesterday, and I told them, if you're ever after church and someone comes up to you in the Well, I didn't say narthex, but because nobody has those anymore. But if you're in the fellowship hall and somebody comes to you as a pastor and says, I really need to talk to you, that is not the time to talk to them. And it's perfectly acceptable to say, I want to give you my full attention. Let's schedule something where we can meet and we can talk together. People are willing to wait for you when you can genuinely give them your full attention. So another thing you can do, like I said earlier, is building rapport, saying, I know what that's like. But if you don't know what it's like, don't say that.
I agree.
Because now you're not being genuine. Never pretend to empathize with something that you don't understand. That's detrimental to a relationship and to a talk like that.
It sounds like a cliche of sorts, though.
Yeah.
Unless you really understand.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to tell somebody, you can say that sounds hard, because that's probably true. Mm-hmm. But if you say, oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
And not make it about you.
No.
Just make it about them when they're telling you
right.
about something difficult.
Yeah, because sometimes people say, oh, well, you had that happen? Let me tell you about the time it happened to me. Well, I didn't come here for your story.
They're showing up with their pain. Listen to their pain.
I came here to tell you something that's hurtful to me. I don't need to know your example.
Right.
Even though people think that's being empathic.
They do.
It's kind of not.
I kind of agree, Andy.
Yeah, it's not super helpful.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do, here's another really helpful tip, is ask open-ended questions. Don't ask yes or no questions. Ask open-ended questions. How did that make you feel? How did you react to that? What do you think you're going to do about it next time? You allow the person you're talking with to expound on their answer and think about it when you ask an open-ended question. Those are really helpful. And the opposite of that is to avoid why questions. Why did you do that? That immediately makes people feel defensive. So, Bill, why did you answer them that way? Well, because. And then you fold the arms, and then you immediately know, I've just put my person on defense. Because as soon as you fold your arms, that's a defensive position. We can talk about the body positioning in a little bit. But that's one thing you never want to do is ask why questions, because that doesn't feel good. It doesn't open the door for conversation. It opens the door for a defense.
But you might have a history with that person, so that's why you're going to ask the why question.
Right.
Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
I have a history with you.
Exactly.
You've done this before. Why'd you do it again?
Yeah. Well, see, even my response was,
you're getting defensive.
Right. Well, wait a minute. Why? And now it's an adversarial conversation instead of a helpful one. Mm-hmm. And the person you're trying to help feels like you're against them already. And that's not going to help you out in this type of situation.
Andy Schuttinga is my guest. Let's jump to a question, Andy, from that showed up on the text line. When being there for someone, is there ever a point when it is okay to pivot from listening to speaking life-giving truth encouragement and perhaps tactfully giving advice? If so, how do you identify that point? For example, if someone has been through a hard loss but have been carrying that loss with them for decades, is it ever appropriate to say, in the kindest way possible, it's time to move forward, friend. Let me help you look ahead instead of down?
Yes. Decades, absolutely. 2 weeks.
I should have this person on the show.
2 weeks, no. Right? Because that's too soon. But when somebody's been dealing with something for that long, I find this is a very, very gray and I think this is an area that requires a lot of discernment and wisdom. Because there are many people in this world, bless their hearts, who love to give helpful advice. They believe that they have good advice to offer, and they maybe do, but they're so quick to offer it instead of letting someone talk through their issues. I believe this fully. Most people, when you give them the opportunity, will often land at a spot that they know inside their heart, inside their mind, that they need to land. And that's what talk therapy is about. You help them get to a point where they kind of own the answer, and they've often had it all along. And what so many people are so quick to do is just to tell them, well, if they just have somebody tell them, they'll understand and they'll do better. Or if they just would listen to me. And so I get what the listener is getting at. I think it's a very fine line. I think you can really step across that line in harsh ways unintentionally by offering advice too soon.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's been something like that someone's been dealing with for a long time, you have to pray for wisdom and discernment that now is the right time to say something gently and kindly.
Mm-hmm.
I can see it both ways for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mourning is one thing, and people get to mourn on whatever schedule they want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if there's a complete debilitizing element to that mourning, that's probably not good.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And we can hang on to grief for a long time. Yeah, I was approached by someone recently who's dealing with a very difficult situation. And it only happened very recently. And I told this person it's really important that the people that you're leading and that you're surrounded by understand that there's a lot of different ways to process grief. And none of them are right and none of them are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of different ways. And people will handle this in different ways, particularly in the first few weeks, few months even, after this tragedy has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to let people grieve in their own way, as long as they're not making it super difficult on everyone else around them. Then you may need to step in and say, hey, you can't keep doing these things because now you're hurting other people around you and you're making it harder for other people to grieve as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very fine line, and we really have to pray for discernment and wisdom from the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
To let us know, is this a time to offer advice, or is this a time where I need to bite my tongue and understand that advice giving is not often as helpful as what people like to think it is?
Andy, another comment. Women speak to each other using our first names. Hearing someone else speak my name is so affirming.
Yeah.
You were talking about
that's really nice. I'm
bro,
glad to hear
dude, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's maybe a tendency men might have, but women find just hearing their name is so affirming.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I do too.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you very much, Esther. That's wonderful.
It is great, and women do tend to be. Women are, on average, research has shown this quite clearly. Women are more in tune with their feelings, and they tend to be much more comfortable talking and sharing their feelings. Research also shows women are more prone to weaponize their feelings too, and so men and women we're made differently, and we definitely handle these things differently. And neither one is necessarily right or wrong. Men have a unique way of communicating with each other in ways that sometimes I think women look at us and think, oh, these guys are Neanderthals. They're not. I mean, they grunt and they bump fists and they hit each other and they talk. But it's amazing how much emotional content can come through between men who don't have to say very much.
I know.
And women tend to need and want to process things more. They tend to be more attentive to their friends and their loved ones who are hurting than men do. So there's definitely some differences between how men and women handle these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy for us to be like, men are dumb and women are smart. That's not true. Some men are dumb. Some women are dumb. We all make dumb things and we all make dumb mistakes. So let's not put one on one gender or the other.
Yeah, we're not saying people are dumb. We're saying people can make dumb mistakes.
Yeah. Oh, I can be pretty dumb sometimes. I suppose I should just speak for myself here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Probably a safer idea.
All right. I agree with not asking why, but is it okay to ask with the intention to listen? What was going on in your head when you did that?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a good way of going about it?
That's a great way to go about it.
Yeah.
Because, again, it's an open-ended question, and it's not a defensive question. You're not asking someone to justify the reason they did something. You're asking them to expound on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's more invitational when you say, tell me more about this than it is why.
Those are magical words, aren't they? Tell me more.
Yeah, tell me more. You mean you want to hear more? Okay, I will tell you more. And it's not an invitation to a floodgate. It's an invitation to the truth of the matter. I think that's really important.
Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. We're going to take a break and come back. He's giving us some helpful instruction as to how to be better listeners and counselors, because we're always getting asked by friends, I'd like your advice. Tell me what you think about this. I've had a down day. Can you hear what's going on with my life? And we just want to be biblical and kind and empathetic and helpful and loving, and hopefully we'll just be better ambassadors for Christ when we're out there loving our neighbors and loving one another. All right, so if you have a question or comment, you can text it over 877-933-2484.
It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold. Drive time, drive time. Let's get it started. Jump in your car. What's for dinner? It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold.
My guest today is Dr. Andy Schuttinga. Don't ask me to spell it. There's some S's in there. There's some T's in there. A couple of G's maybe.
Yeah, just one.
Just one G?
Yeah, that's it.
A couple of I's?
Just one.
Okay. Well, I don't know how to spell your name.
There's two T's. It's S. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that on the radio. No, it's Schuttinga.
Yeah.
It's
and there's
Dutch.
a lot of different ways you could say it.
Oh, I've heard them all.
I know you have.
Yeah. Some of them
don't-
I shouldn't even say on the radio because they sound really bad.
Yeah. All right, Andy, we are talking today with Andy about just improving our skill set when it comes to having times of opportunity to counsel somebody, or somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'd love to get your take on this, or I've really had a rotten day. Can you listen to my problems today? And you just want to be thoughtful and kind and useful and helpful and loving, and you want to show Christ in that opportunity.
Yeah.
So here's another question, Andy, that came in. What happens if the open-ended question never gets answered? Do we make another question?
Oh, I think you circle back to the original question.
Just keep honing in on the original question?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
in the counseling world, this will surprise you. It's called avoidance, right? And that will happen. They teach you how to deal with that sort of thing in your counseling classes. When you ask a client a question, and obviously none of you are going to be dealing with clients, you're dealing with friends or family or loved ones or even maybe a coworker. When they don't answer the question, you can do one of two things. You can just be really direct and say, you never answered my question. How are you feeling about this? Or you could rephrase it in another way, which just sounds more tricky, but it's not, because you're trying to get to the heart of the matter. And I think sometimes it takes a little extra skill to get the truth out of people. And sometimes when, people obfuscate and they distract when they really don't want to answer the question, and that tells you something. Mm-hmm. It tells you that this is a pretty big deal and they're really struggling with it. And it could be they maybe don't feel like they can trust you with that information. That's also part of it. They may not want to tell you. And then you can say, well, are you comfortable talking about that with me? Because you really didn't answer the question. If it's not something you want to talk about, that's okay. Let me know how I can help. That's a great response. It's a lot better than, how come you're not answering my question?
Yeah.
Right? Because now we're done, right? Now you're not going to accomplish anything.
Okay, Andy, for those who just climbed in their car, let's bring them up to speed on where we are. So the first thing you're going to want to do is pretty much give that person you're talking to your undivided attention.
Yes.
Yep. And try to make sure you let them know that the phone's off. I've heard people say, when I went and talked to my friend, Don, he was, I felt like I was the only one in the room.
Yeah, that's great.
You've
feeling.
heard that expression before?
Oh, yeah. It's a great feeling, too, to be on the listening end or on the speaking end of that.
Yeah, where they just felt like you gave them their complete undivided attention.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
One of my least favorite things in the world is when you're talking to somebody in a crowded space and they never look you in the eye. They're always looking over your shoulder. They're looking around
for someone
more
else, interesting to talk to.
For someone more interesting or someone more important in their mind.
Exactly.
And that's like one of the cardinal sins of listening to people is looking. Now, if you're meeting with somebody one-on-one, that's different. But even if you say, hey, let's have coffee together. Let's meet at a name brand coffee shop. And you go there and you're looking at the people in line, you're looking at the people coming to the door. They're immediately going to feel like you're really not here listening to me. Mm-hmm. I don't recommend you go have difficult conversations in crowded spaces.
Yeah, I agree.
You want to have coffee? Let's get coffee, and then let's go somewhere quiet.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially if you realize you're easily distracted.
Yep.
That's a good self-awareness.
Okay. What else?
Building rapport.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I understand how you feel. I know what that's like, or I understand. I've been there. We're in this together.
Thank you for trusting me with this information.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are you good with me praying about your situation?
Yes.
Can I do it right now just to get things started?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes that's literally the best thing that you can do for someone is just tell them, I will pray for you.
But how about right now? How about, can I pray right now?
Oh, yeah.
As we're having this conversation, just to make sure the Holy Spirit enters it and we can continue to talk.
Yeah, that's a really great thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good to pray in the moment.
I agree.
There's never a bad time for that. And that's another thing, going back to where we very started with, that's what pastoral counseling is about, is reaching people on a spiritual level too. You might start every counseling session with a pastoral counselor with prayer. And you don't just pray for your problem, you pray for discernment and wisdom, and you pray for open minds and open hearts while we're talking together. Yeah. Those are good things to pray for. And even if you're, secular therapist, or, if you're a counselor who's a Christian, but you're not doing Christian counseling, you can pray for your clients before they get there, because not all of your clients are going to be believers or share your faith. And it's actually inappropriate to do so if you are. You can't use therapy as an evangelism tool.
Right.
That's a big ethical dilemma. Yeah. That's an ethical problem. It's not a conversion tactic.
Yes, I agree.
You're taking advantage of people. And so actually that's something to think about too here is, what's the line between like sharing Jesus and caring for people in a counseling way? Well, if you're not a therapist, that's different. And so you might be able to use some of these basic counseling skills with people who are in need, who are in, like mental anguish, who are in mental need. I think it's okay then to say, hey, do you have a faith life? Do you believe in God at all? Because I do, and I will pray for you. If that's okay. That's a great entry into a conversation about who Jesus is and how much God loves us. And you're not breaking any kind of ethical rules because you don't have any, because you're not a therapist. So there's some pros and cons here to being able to do some level of lay counseling with people that you care about, and evangelism. You can wrap those into the same thing.
Yeah, I sometimes put it back on me where I'll say, I'm a praying person. I do that all the time. Is this something that I could be praying for you for?
Yeah.
And you'll get an answer pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Very quickly. Like, oh, no, that's okay.
Yeah. Or,
wow, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, right.
Then you got more conversation ahead.
You bet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Andy Schuttinga, what's next?
And we're still summarizing here, right?
No, I think we're done.
Okay, we're
ready to move on to the next point.
Okay, so you always want to stay focused on what the person is talking about. And by that, I mean stay away from tangents and stay away from, I alluded to this earlier, stay away from telling your own stories. There's nothing worse than, well, no, that's not true. There are worse things. It's bad when you're telling somebody, here's my dilemma, here's my situation, and they say, oh, yeah, let me tell you about the time I had that. And invariably, it's either way worse or not as bad. Like, I cut the tip of my finger off. Oh, well, I cut my whole hand off, and they put it back, right? There's the one-up storyteller.
Yeah.
That's not helpful in this situation.
No, I agree.
So you want to avoid that. Another thing you can do is called immediacy, which is when you tell the person you're talking to, you share how you feel about it, but only in terms of, wow, that's so hard. I feel for you, or that breaks my heart to hear you say that, or I'm sad for you. And by sharing your immediate feeling with them, that's another way of empathizing and showing I really care for you. That's so hard. Hey, my grandma just died. I feel so sorry for you. I know what that feels like. I lost my grandmother too. And then you leave it at that and you go back to them. You go back to their feelings and their thoughts. And that's another way of somebody saying, you get me. You get it. And you don't have to expound upon it. It's just a quick notice that says, I know what you're going through. And that can be really helpful. Now, here's one of the very hardest things of all. Silence. And just now we can't do that on the radio for very long because they'll change the channel. But silence is an important tool in your listening toolkit. When you feel like, man, I feel like I should say something, just don't. Because if you don't have anything to say,
don't fill space.
Right. That could be a cue just to let whatever the person said just kind of marinate in your mind and in their mind. And 9 times out of 10, the person will continue to talk. I remember my grad school teacher, Joanne Brandt, the late Joanne Brandt. She was a great professor, and she was a big proponent of utilizing silence in counseling sessions. She would hammer that home to us all the time, whether you're doing marriage counseling or whether you're doing individual or even a full family. Sometimes it's best just to keep your mouth closed and let the moment take care of itself.
Interesting.
And let the person, they might be thinking of what to say next. You don't have to pull it out of them. Just give them a chance. Now, if you're silent for 4 minutes, okay, it's probably time to say something.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're looking to you like, are you going to say something? Then have something ready to say. But be slow to speak and anxious to listen. Those are really, that's great advice that I've been given. And it's hard, though. It's hard to be silent.
Yeah, I think one of the things I try to think about is, have they completed their thought? Are they done on this train that they're on right now? Have they come to a conclusion?
Yes. You're exactly right.
When I know the coast is clear and they've completed their thought, I think it's then okay to interject or to say something sympathetic. Or,
yeah. Or even say, did you have anything more you wanted to add to that?
Yeah.
Or, I feel like there's more you want to tell me. That's a great one, too. Or there's, even if you're really into a situation, you can even say things like, I feel like there's more that you want to tell me. And they might say, no, that's it. That's the whole thing. You don't want to push people. You want to gently draw things out.
Mm-hmm.
That's most effective.
All right, we'll take a very short break and be back with Dr. Andy Schuttinga. We're talking today about just improving our awareness when we're having conversations with people that are looking for some care, counseling, advice, and we're just people that like or love that person. We're not trained counselors, so we're just trying to figure out the best way to have the best amount of tools in the toolkit so we can be as helpful as possible. If you have a question or comment, 877-933-2484. If there's one thing we want to do here at Faith Radio is we really want to connect you to the Word of God. We want the Word of God to dwell in you richly. We want you to understand the depth and breadth of God's love for you, which we learn through His Word. One of the very best ways we can do that is by reading through the Bible together. I hope you can plan on doing that this Christmas. Grow in your understanding of the Bible and find new excitement in welcoming Jesus into your heart in new ways. You can download your free Advent reading plan at myfaithradio.com. I'm back with Dr. Andy Schuttinga, and Andy, we talked throughout the whole break, so I didn't technically get a break. So I need a break right now.
I'll be done in 10 minutes, so that doesn't bother me.
That's true. But when we were chatting about ways in which we can be helpful, and we have a tendency at times to say things like, well, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Sometimes it's helpful just to suit up and show up and do something.
Right.
So anyway.
That's a great point. And it can be more helpful. I think you're right. It's almost like you put a burden on somebody to choose an adventure. Yeah,
well, let me read the question that came in.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've heard mixed advice on this. When my friends are having a rough time, I like to ask, what do you need from me right now?
Yeah.
However, I've heard that this question actually places an additional burden on the person since it gives them extra work to do. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think my reaction to that is it probably depends a lot on the relationship. If you're a good friend, you probably already know what they need.
Yeah, good point.
You probably know it. So you probably don't need to ask. You can probably just do something for them. We were talking about like when somebody, like loses a loved one and you say, how did you phrase it, Bill?
Or if there's anything I can do, let me know.
Yeah, right. Well, a lot of people, like you said, aren't going to take you up on that.
They have a hard time asking for help.
They maybe don't know you super well.
Yep.
And so it can be you wanting to be helpful. Maybe take that choice out of the grieving person's hand or the person dealing with a situation, and figure out through other means what they might need. At the same time, I also understand if you don't know somebody super well and you want to help, you can tell them, I want to help you. Here are some things that I could do. I can make you a meal. I could do these things. Would that be okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or
that's helpful.
You can, like you said, you can just go do it. It's a really interesting question, and I think a lot of it depends on how well you know the person that you're trying to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know them well, you don't need to ask the question. You can just do it.
Yeah,
and they'll probably accept it and be happy about it. If you don't know a person very well, maybe offer them something that's a little safer, like a meal, or can I buy you some groceries? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or you can tell them, I would like to do this for you. Is that okay with you?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to walk your dog for you. Well, I want to walk my own dog. So that gives them the chance to say, oh, that's okay. We don't need help with that.
Yeah, that's therapeutic for me.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But one thing I would like to do is, retar my driveway.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be really nice.
There's a house in Blaine I know of that could probably use that.
Yeah,
but we'll wait until spring. So yeah, there's myriad ways that you can help somebody who's dealing with a crisis.
Yeah,
because they might have a death in the family. They might be very sick. We had a family member who was dealing with cancer a year ago, and it was debilitating physically. The treatments were really rough.
Mm-hmm.
The person was very sick, and one of their neighbors just showed up one day and said, I paid for your snow to be removed all winter.
Wow. Beautiful.
No questions asked.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't ask for permission. They just said, look, we paid the plow guy to take care of your driveway all year. You don't have to worry about it.
Nice.
Now they don't know them well.
Wow.
They didn't come over and ask for permission. They just did it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really turn that down. I really like to run my snowblower in sub-zero temperatures. No. You say thank you, and that's what they did. They just simply said thank you,
mm-hmm.
and that's a pretty great thing. Now, if you say I'll come and paint your living room, well, that's a little invasive. I maybe don't want that,
yeah.
And so you have to be okay to say no, thank you. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that.
Yeah, there is, and probably a little effort is better than no effort at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's the key. All right, Andy, we only got a couple minutes left. Let's get some things in a brown paper bag for people to take home.
Okay, here's some things that you can do physically that are really helpful in these situations. Okay. Number one, have an open stance or open seating. In other words, have a body position that is, your arms aren't closed, your legs aren't closed. You can cross your legs a little bit, that's fine, but don't cross your arms. Keep your arms wide and square people up. Eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder.
Makes a difference.
Does
that make a difference?
Yeah. Oh, it makes a huge difference.
I did not know that.
Oh, it makes a very big difference.
Okay.
You don't want to be the person at church that stands like shoulder to shoulder and you're both like staring at the front of church together talking. Mm-hmm. That's always kind of awkward, right?
Yep.
Make eye contact. Make body contact in terms of pointing towards one another.
Mm-hmm. And
don't touch people unless they really know you well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a really big believer in this. You have to be careful just randomly hugging people. They may not appreciate you touching them if they don't know you well. You're like, oh, you're grieving, you're in trouble, I'll hug you. No, thanks, I don't want you to hug me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you well. Another thing is, we talked about this, make good eye contact, avoid folding your arms, and never eye roll anybody. Because if you roll your eyes, research has shown that that is a sign of contempt. So if somebody says to you, hey, I've got this issue, and you're like, roll your eyes and say, I'll get this again, that they feel that from you for sure.
Yeah, that's bad.
Have Kleenex ready. If you're meeting somebody in a private place, mm-hmm. make sure you have some Kleenex available. Sleeves are not great. Make sure you have a good distance. Have a little bit of space in between you. Never meet with somebody behind a desk. You don't want to do lay counseling behind a desk or have a barrier in between you.
Okay.
That's not great. And try to be relaxed. Just be yourself. Be genuine. Mm-hmm. Be who you are. Don't try to turn into a therapist or try to be a lay counselor. Just be yourself. That's what people want. They want the genuine you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people want.
And be other-focused, not self-focused. And I think you're going to be a great listener and amateur counselor.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. All right, Andy, that is interesting time. Thank you for bringing us that information. And
You bet.
And it's been great seeing you. We will take a short break and be back with more in just a minute. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.